All right, thanks, Harry. Standing between you and the lunch that Harry has promised. I will not take time to deep dive into the Shell's organization. That's good for you. I will just say that Shell's been described as a company of Dutch engineers and Scottish accountants. Now, in order to diversify our gene pool, we later recruited US lawyers, and that's how they see the future. All it says is that the future cannot be certain. Now, if you all please press I accept in the conference app on your smartphone, I will receive a signal through my connected watch, and I know I can continue. Because the future cannot be certain, we felt the need, more than 40 years ago, in order to assess the robustness of our multi-billion investments over decades, we felt the need not to predict the future, because we knew it would be futile, but to chart different possible futures. We do this every 4 or 5 years, first by assessing what is the crossroad that the economy and society at large have reached. Then by exploring what a future world would look like if we take this road or if we take that road. And finally, by considering that between those two radically different scenarios that we usually design to be as far apart as possible, we cover a good enough range of possible futures against which we can assess the robustness of our strategies and investment decisions. For instance, 25 years ago, I distinctly remember in the Shell scenarios of the time reading about the great game of gas. The scenarios were exploring a world where oil, which is very versatile in terms of the number of products it can be turned into, would become harder to get. And gas, which is not so versatile, would become a lot more abundant. How fast and hard that would happen was very scenario dependent. But with the help of those scenarios, we've been able to scale up over decades gas solutions, such as, for example, gas to liquid, which is essentially a technology that turns gas into oil products. I have worked over the last 10 years on the lubricants part of gas to liquid, and I feel very proud to be working for a company that can inject that amount of long-term thinking into its business decision. As a matter of fact, this means that now our premium lubricants are made from gas. The latest scenarios were published in 2013. The starting point, as I described, is to identify what is the crossroad that the economy and society have reached. The way to describe it is either advantage will bring more advantage to the incumbents in whatever activity, in whatever level of society. Either advantage brings more advantage and they can continue to concentrate influence and decision-making power, or somehow the cards get reshuffled through reform and under the pressure of emerging economies as well as emerging new forms of economy. In the first case, where advantage brings more advantage, we enter a scenario which we call mountains. It's solid, it's rigid, it's very often pyramidal, it's slow to move, but major policy and infrastructure decisions can be implemented from the top down. If we apply this lens to the world of energy, we continue to see oil in red, gas in dark green, and even coal in black. But towards the end of the period, which goes all the way to 2060, we see nuclear energy in yellow becoming an important part of the mix. And this is because, in a mountain scenario, nuclear energy is a form of energy that needs the might of the incumbent electricity company and the strong backing of central government. In the second case, we enter a scenario which is a lot more fluid, prone to rapid change, which we call oceans. This is a world where change happens largely from the bottom up, with the consequence that it is a lot more localized and brings about a greater diversity of approaches. In this scenario, we see solar energy in orange emerging as a major component of the energy mix, as this is a form of energy that can be harnessed through local and even individual decision-making, as long as the legislative environment evolves to facilitate it. So that's the two scenarios being described very rapidly. Now, if we are equipped with those mountains and oceans scenario as different lenses through which we can see the world, we turn to one of the mega trends of our time, which is urbanization. Just a few numbers: from 7 billion people on the planet today, of which 50% approximately live in cities, to 9 billion in 2050 and 75% living in cities, we see urbanization happening at an unprecedented rate. That is the equivalent of one new New York City every 6 weeks. So this is a trend that matters, not only because of the gigantic numbers, but also because bad urban planning will put additional pressure on resources and quality of life, while well-designed cities can be engines for growth, innovation, collaboration, as well as good places to live. Of course, much of it is happening in Eastern Asia. This is a picture of Shanghai that was taken only 25 years ago. Please note the two tall buildings, the one with the green roof and the one with the pointy one on the left. They're still here. Boy Scouts have their own Swiss Army knife. Shell Scouts have their own clicker. They're here. But they've been completely outgrown by the pace of urbanization that Shanghai has gone through. This pace and scale of urbanization bring about tremendous challenges, but as we've already heard, with challenges also come new opportunities. As Plato would say, necessity is the mother of invention. So let me rush through 6 of the challenges that we see and then conclude by reflecting on how they could be addressed in a mountain scenario and in an oceans scenario. The first challenge is overcrowding. Today, nearly a third of the world urban population live in slum conditions. It is completely obvious to me that a solution will emerge to tackle this challenge. I don't know which one and how fast, but given the size of the challenge and hence of the opportunity, the only question that we should ask ourselves is whether we want to be part of the solution or whether we want to let others do it. Because as Thomas Friedman says, in the world is flat, whatever can be done will be done, and I'm sure that some solutions will emerge for that. Likewise, for air pollution, half of the world urban population lives today in cities where the level of air pollution exceeds the World Health Organization recommended level by a factor of 2.5 or more. There again, the status quo is simply unthinkable. Municipalities will take action. They are already taking action. Again, the question for us is going to be whether we want to be part of the solution or let others do it. From the simplest of solutions, which consists in paving dirt roads in those places in the world where dirt particulate is still a major contributing factor, to more sophisticated technologies that harness chemistry to fix a pollutant on the pavement, there is room for shaking the status quo. Congestion, very briefly, is a contributing factor to air pollution, but in its own right, it is also a major source of inefficiencies for the economy and for quality of life. Governance, let's spend a bit more time on this one. A city is a very big and complex entity. We typically manage complex systems, whether they are cities or otherwise, by breaking them down into manageable parts. But we all know, in our respective organizations, that effective management of the parts does not necessarily result into an optimum for the whole. For instance, we've heard about road pavement being used to harvest energy, either heat or photovoltaic. This is not a decision that can be taken by the Department of Road Maintenance on their own. It can only be taken looking at the combined transport, energy, utility, infrastructure in an integrated way. Most cities are grappling today with the challenge of governance and trying to inject more systemic thinking into their decision making. And for this, they will need like-minded partners. And if you wonder whether this is all worth it, please consider that over the next 30 years, it is estimated that 350 trillions will be spent on urban investment and operations. So if you want to follow the money, this is a pretty good lead. Finally, health. In a place like Pakistan, not the most advanced economy, but already quite advanced, nearly 50% of the wastewater is not collected through sewage systems. And in a world where the population increases and gets more concentrated, this is posing an increasing public health risk. At this point, let me share with you a very personal belief. The ultimate purpose of innovation is not that I receive a signal through my connected watch. It might be handy, but it's not the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose is human progress.